Let's welcome in Tom Murphy into the conversation this morning. Keep it going with Arkansas basketball. Tom, one of the things that I think stood out to a lot of people in overtime during this game is Arkansas held Missouri to one field goal. In the last, 2 minutes and 53 seconds, they were held without a field goal. What did you think of the Arkansas defense and how they picked it up in overtime?
Yeah, they picked it up very well. And, Missouri, which got an unbelievable array of three-pointers from unexpected, not your usual suspects. Mm-hmm. They kept them in the game, and I think they rebounded better. I mean, right at the end of regulation, Mitchell Smith got a really critical offensive rebound and put back, and they defended better. And I'll tell you, the one thing that didn't happen in this game that I kind of thought would happen more, I thought Xavier Pinson would be more of a driver. And it turned out Drew Smith was the guy who penetrated more often. I mean, I guess they're kind of co-point guards or however you want to say it.
Yeah.
But after Missouri's loss at Ole Miss, I read Conzo's quotes that were Xavier Pinson cannot be an east-west guy. He's got to go downhill. And I thought we'd see him driving more. He did some, and to some success. But, the Razorbacks, that was a intestinal fortitude game, because Eric Musselman pointed this out, that oftentimes the team that is just on the brink of winning in regulation and then it goes into overtime, they have a letdown, a deflation, mm-hmm. and they're thinking, dang, that was our game, and we let it slip, and then you lose in overtime. And they didn't let that happen. So what a huge win for the Razorbacks.
Tom, one of the other reasons they were able to pull it out during the overtime period is free throw shooting. They go 20 of 23 during the game. Moses Moody hit a couple clutch ones. Justin Smith, who I think is about a 50% on the season, he hit 6 of 7, including to ice the game late with 2 down the stretch. The clutch free throw shooting has not just been evident in this past game, but several games this season, and now they're top 60 in college basketball in that category. What have you thought about that statistic and how important that's going to be, especially with these higher competition games that are still on the schedule?
Yeah, when it comes down to the wire and it's a tight game and you're on the line, just think about the Jalen Tate free throws. He was 63% at the time, but mm-hmm. He shot well. He made 3 or 4 the other night. But Moses Moody's were really clutch.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're up 1, there's a foul, and if you miss, then they can take the lead on you. But he made them both, and so that made Missouri have to try a 3-pointer. And I think Devo Davis did a good job getting up in Pinson's grill and obscuring his vision on that last 3, because it really wasn't very close at all. But yeah, I agree that the free throw shooting, and they got to find a way to get Connor Vanover to the line a little bit more, because that dude hasn't missed on the year. But Moses Moody's was in particular really fine free throw shooting.
Y'all are right on it, because when you look at this, you compare the first half, second half, and overtime stats. Arkansas on the free throws 7 of 8 in the first half, 6 of 6 second half. But you compare that to overtime, you had 9 attempts, you made 7. You mentioned Moody 4 of 4 in overtime. That's the deal. And then for the game, you get out rebounded by a margin of 39 to 34. But in overtime, Tom, where it counts the most, you're ahead 5-2 on the rebound. So to me, it's about those 2 things in those 5 minutes. You didn't let down on the effort. You didn't let down on your focus. You made 7 of 9 free throws, and you got the rebounds you needed.
Yeah, and when there was that long delay
mm-hmm.
Over the clean block and the review on it, and when they came back, can you imagine how upset and angry Razorback fans would have been? Because it seems like that's kind of the way it goes a lot. If Missouri had pulled off some shot at the end and the Razorbacks don't go down and score. But no, they defended very well, and I'm not sure the action that led to the tips Drew Smith pass. He penetrated and was passing to somebody, and Moses wound up with a ball. And good job by Moses covering up. So he was the guy who got fouled. I'd like to have seen him maybe dribble out of that and run off a few more seconds. But good job. And yep, they were super clutch. And I do think that defensive rebounding is something that the Razorbacks have got to clean up a little bit more. They got some big games coming against Alabama and LSU and Florida. Yep. If the Gators can get in here.
Yeah, another big thing that happened in overtime, with Jeremiah Tillman out, Mitchell Smith had more pressure on him to perform and get those rebounds. Tom, he fouls out 40 seconds into overtime, picks up his 5th foul, and I thought that was a huge shift of dynamics, and obviously I think one of the big edges that Arkansas had over the last, 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah, no question. And Connor Vanover was saying he had hoped Tillman would be available in this game, but man, it certainly would have made a difference on the interior. And like we said, Arkansas was still out rebounded, but yeah, they had to go with Parker Braun. Less experienced, not quite as agile, nimble around the basket as Tillman and Mitchell Smith. And Mitchell Smith hurt him early with his 3-point shooting, and who would have thought that Buggs and Watson would have contributed all the threes that they did. It's 2 games in a row. Think about this. They were out-rebounded by both Kentucky and Missouri and had phenomenal 3-point shooting in both games on the road, and they won both of them. That's a feather in your cap that you were able to pull those 2 off.
Yeah, you mentioned out-rebounded for the game, but we don't focus enough on what happens late a lot of time. We look at these stats for the game because that's what's presented to us, but it's really what happens late in these games. The free throws you make in the final 2, 3, 4 minutes of regulation, and certainly in overtime, the rebounds that you got in overtime. Yeah, the stats are what they are for the game, but when it counted the most, that's where you performed, and that's what got you over the edge, over the hump.
Yep, and they are a team that is very confident now in the way they're performing down the stretch of game. And, just say if J.D. Notae picks up his level back to where it was and is more of a scorer, then you've got yourself even greater depth. And, Vance Jackson gives you more quality minutes. This upcoming game against Florida with this Colin Castleton guy, he's a very skilled big man who can pull you out. And I think Jalen Williams is going to have to perform. You have to give them some very quality minutes along with Vanover trying to guard Castleton.
Tom Murphy with us here on the Morning Rush, recapping the Arkansas basketball win over the Missouri Tigers. Tom, you mentioned Jeremiah Tillman. I think it was about 15, 20 minutes when that news broke before the game began. He had a death in his family, which obviously we don't wish on anyone. And with Connor, you mentioned his comments. He wanted to play Tillman because he had just such a poor performance. I think 0 for 11 was the outing that Connor had against Missouri last time. Eric Musselman was asked about that after the game. It's like, what do you take away with Tillman not playing? He responded, well, we didn't have Justin Smith last time. So I almost want to temper the win a little bit just because their best player, or one of their best players, depending on how you look at it, one on the floor. Tom, is that okay to do, to say that because one of their best, if not their best player, wasn't on the field, wasn't on the court on Saturday?
Well, I mean, of course, you take everything into perspective, and Tillman been there, then they would have had more options, and a guy who punished Arkansas the last several times they played him. But hey, it doesn't matter. It's a win now.
Yeah.
And it's a quad 1 win, it's a road win, and the Razorbacks are firmly in the NCAA bracket now. They just need to win the majority of the rest of these games. Maybe win another road game at South Carolina or A&M, and between Florida, LSU, and Alabama coming in here, win 2 out of 3, and I think you're in fine position to make the NCAA field.
Yeah. You can't lose to A&M or South Carolina. Those are resume killers. That wouldn't take you out of the tournament, but might cost you a line or 2 on the seeding.
Yeah, you don't want to wind up going in there as like an 11. You'll wind up playing a tough team pretty quickly. I also don't like being a 9. Nope. You guys know what that means. And I think recently Arkansas has wound up against number 2 North Carolina a couple times. Yeah. And even though they should have beat them that one time, it's just a tougher draw. So you'd like to be a 7. Of course, then that puts you against the 2. But anyway, I think they're firmly in the field, and I think if they win 4 out of their last 6, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, because they're second right now in the Southeastern Conference, tied with LSU, and they have a chance to finish off that tiebreaker because LSU comes to town.
And we saw the peak at the top 16 seed, and they had Missouri in there as 16. So we got a peek at that Saturday. So it gives you an idea of what the committee thinks as far as the quality guys of competition you did beat on Saturday.
Absolutely right. And, I mean, in Tennessee, which was also in that top 16, I think they were 11, they also lose to LSU. So it's a good fight for that double bye after Bama, because I think it would be really hard for them to fall out of it. But between Florida, Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee, that's a big battle to get those other three spots in the double bye. And as I said with you guys on Thursday last week, it's all right there in front of the Razorbacks. If they take care of their business in those home games against Florida, Bama, LSU, I think they'll be in strong position to have a double bye, and I think that puts you in the NCAA field easily.
All right, well, let's get back to coffee and watching the snow. One more here. We were talking about this earlier in the program. Arkansas beats Kentucky on the road and then goes and gets a top 10 win on the road against Missouri. That's the best week for Arkansas basketball since when, Tom?
Oh, my gosh. I can't even imagine. I guess that 15 team that finished real strong probably had a great week in there somewhere, but for me to remember the details of who they beat in a given week, that's tough. Well, have you got some contenders?
Well, first thing that came to mind, I don't know if it's the right answer, was when you beat Oklahoma and Texas back-to-back. And that's going back to, 08 or what? I didn't look up the year on that, but we know Pelfrey wearing the red jacket. Well, we're talking about 2017 might be another one in the way they played in the tournament. But I just asked the question. I don't know that there is one right answer. It just gives you, to me, some perspective on, hey, Arkansas had a heck of a week last week, winning at 2 road games, one including Kentucky and top 10 Missouri. Absolutely. No matter what has happened with Kentucky this year, that's still a tough deal to go up and rough and win. A number of teams have done it this year. But, yeah, when people think back upon this season, and Arkansas was below 500 in conference play, and their run has included this particular week, that will be a highlight when people think about this season in years to come. And hopefully there's some a sprinkling of really fun postseason in at the end of it as well.
Tom, appreciate your time, buddy. We'll talk a little Arkansas preview this weekend against A&M, and a little recap on Thursday after the Florida game Tuesday.
Yeah, you betcha. Everybody stay warm. See y'all.